Welcome to Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. Casey Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. I'm your host, Ruth Baum Biggis. The world has been spiraling due to COVID and conflict the past few years, bringing tremendous health challenges here at home and abroad. In the beginning stages of the pandemic, healthcare professionals suffered the brunt of the responsibility for saving lives. Hardest hit populations included Native Americans who really struggled. Then war broke out in Ukraine. In both situations, Dr. Gary Morsch, an ER doctor and a retired Army colonel, couldn't stand by. Helping others is part of his DNA. So this energetic 70-year-old physician jumped in to do what he does so well, and that's galvanize and direct response to help those in harm's way. First with the COVID Care Force, helping on the front lines of the pandemic, helping to relieve critical medical staffing shortages, and now in Ukraine with the newly named Global Care Force. And just back from Ukraine, it's an honor to welcome Dr. Morsch back to Casey Cares for conversation about his humanitarian medical work. It's so great to see you, Dr. Morsch.
Thank you, Ruth. It's good to be with you, and congratulations on all the good work you do with KC Cares. It's awesome.
Well, you're very kind. We love to be able to bring stories like yours to our audience. Let's start with the most immediate and what you've been doing. You literally just got back from being in Ukraine. Share with us what that's like. What's really the boots on the ground situation?
Well, let me start with even more immediate. As I walked into the office, I am back from Ukraine. That was my second trip. I walk into the office here, and there's stacks of medicines and supplies and antibiotics and all kinds of things, wound dressings, because we have the nurse that's leading our next medical team leaves Tuesday. So she's getting everything packed up and ready to go to lead a medical team there next week. So that's happening right now. But I returned, of course, a few weeks ago from my second visit, and I decided of course, we're wanting to work as close as we can to the need, find the right need. It's always important to do the right thing. Not just to do it because it's the sexy thing to do or it's the fun thing or the easy thing, but to find out what is it that me and my team of volunteer healthcare professionals, what can we do to really move the dial? How can we help? Is there a niche for us? We're not doing this so we can feel good. We want to do what helps you. So that's why I've made 2 trips over there, meeting with doctors, traveling closer to the front lines. I was within 60 miles of the front lines the last time, and in hospitals that were taking the wounded directly from the battlefield. And so trying to determine what is the best thing we can do. And we're doing several things over there. So if you want, I can kind of outline what it is we're doing. And you probably have questions too about the state of how do the people feel and all of that. And I'm sure happy to answer any of those. What would you like to go? Where would you like to go next?
Well, I'd love for you to share. What is it that you all are doing on the ground?
Right. Okay. So we have formed partnerships with several hospitals that I've visited and met with their doctors. We've had, so we're doing so actually probably 3 or 4 different things, 2 major things with healthcare volunteers. And if there are any healthcare professionals who are watching this and want to get more information on how they can volunteer, I'm sure you'll be sharing our contact information along the way. But we're recruiting surgeons and like orthopedists, trauma surgeons, chest surgeons, even neurosurgeons. We're recruiting surgeons that can work in the hospitals, treating the soldiers, wounded soldiers, treating combat injuries, and civilians who are caught as well in the crossfire. And so we have hospitals designated where these doctors can work. We're also then organizing our first mobile medical team. And this is a primary care team that is more built around family practice, family medicine, and say urgent care. It's not in the hospital. It'll be a mobile clinic. We've purchased through donations. We've been able to purchase a van for the medical team to ride in along with translators. And then we've also have a cargo van. So actually the team will be 12 people. I mean, it's a large group of people counting translators, logistics people, doctors and nurses. And we've visited and identified about 4 or 5, I think it's 5 villages and or towns. In a village, when I say village, we're talking about several thousands of people. We're not talking about just a real tiny place. These they talked about Bucha, if you remember on the news early on when the Russians were close to Kyiv, and Irpin. They talked about the villages that were destroyed. I've been to them several times, and I thought they only had a few hundred people, but Bucha has like 20,000 people. I mean, it's a large a town with extensive damage and destruction and loss of life, of course. Mm-hmm. So we have this. What's happened is because of the war, the government is shifting personnel. They have a universal healthcare system. So the doctors work for the government, the nurses, all the healthcare is part of the government. It'd be like the VA taking care of everything in our country, all of it. So everyone works for the government. Yes, there are private practices and things like that, of course, but the government has shifted a lot of the medical resources to the front lines because of this terrible war. And so some of the clinics that the people were going to are now closed. The clinics are there, the buildings are there, the equipment is there, the beds are there, the exam tables, the chairs in the waiting room are there, but there's no one to staff it. So what we're doing is we're going to these towns and having a clinic once every month. Once every month, we'll come for a day or two and stay there. Now, that's not as good as what they had, but at least they're getting some primary care. And the thing is, it used to be people might say, well, can't they drive? Well, a lot of the people that had cars have fled the country. So the people who are left are elderly or sick or very impoverished, and they don't own cars. So, and then the buses are not running because of the war. So they just don't have any choice. So anyway, our primary care teams will be traveling from Kyiv out to surrounding towns and all the way down to the Black Sea to the south, which is much nearer the front lines to Odessa. And so we have identified the buildings, the locations, the clinic buildings. Some places it's a school that we're using because they haven't brought the kids back to school. Maybe it was damaged by the rockets and missiles the Russians have sent, but we can use it for a clinic on a temporary basis. So that's what our primary care teams are doing. So we have surgical teams, primary care teams, and then we are bringing in medicines and also donating, making cash contributions to various organizations that are helping the poor people, the people who are left there, who don't have access to medicines to buy what they need. We can buy some medicines there in Ukraine. They're more expensive, but some of them are it's better to buy them there than to try to transport them. And then the final thing we've been doing, when the war first started, we asked doctors working in the trauma centers, what do you need most? And one of the things they said they needed were these specialized wound vacuum systems. These are negative pressure wound vacuums that cause a wound to heal about 4 or 5 times faster than normal. Also, it's cleaner. It cuts down on infection and secondary problems. And they're expensive. They cost several thousands of dollars, and they can be reused over and over again. And so we visited hospitals that had none of these. They knew about them. We visited a hospital that has 800 beds. They only had 25 of these machines, and each patient needs one to use for 2 to 4 weeks until the wounds, these bad wounds, heal up. So we've been getting some donated and some we're purchasing, and we're taking those over and doing training on how to best use them. So that's kind of the big picture of what Global Care Force is doing in Ukraine.
That's amazing. And we should remind the audience, you are a nonprofit organization, and the things that you're taking are not inexpensive.
Right.
How do you do that?
Well, it's like every not-for-profit. You go out and beat the bushes, and you ask people to support what you're doing, to be generous to you. And one thing we know about Kansas City, and you know better than most anyone, is Kansas City is a very generous community. Some of the largest community foundations in the country are right here in Kansas City. So people are very generous and have donated to us. The other thing we do is we've developed a really, I believe, a very unique, this is a dream of mine for a long time, a platform, very high tech. You can do it with your phone and your laptop, but a fundraising platform. It's like a GoFundMe page, but it's through Global Care Force. And if people go to our website, they can see which volunteers are going to which places, because we're still sending people to the Indian reservations. We're still sending people to the hospices out in the West and in Mexico, working with people that are in nursing homes and hospices. So anyway, what we do is we create a kind of a little fundraising page with their picture and what they're going to be doing and their own little statements of why they're doing this. And then people can send that link to their friends and family, and then people can very easily make a donation on behalf of that volunteer. It's a tax deductible donation. So,
and that's just at your website, which is Global Care Force Ruth, you would know. ORG. That's exactly right. Global Care Force .org. And you'll find ways to donate, to sponsor a volunteer, to learn about what we're doing. There'll be links to this interview and past interviews, Ruth. And so anyway, learn more about us at globalcareforce.org, and you can volunteer there. You can learn about volunteer opportunities when the next teams are going. We've got teams going scheduled all the way through March. So, but next
we have
year already?
Yeah, every month. But we have, and the teams go for 2 weeks. And so we look for family doctors or internists or pediatricians or general practice or a doc that feels comfortable doing primary care. We look for nurse practitioners, physician assistants, nurses, RNs, LPNs, CNAs, paramedics, EMTs. So we're looking for people with some kind of medical, because we'll put everybody, some people will do vital signs, checking people in. Others will work at the pharmacy where we give the medicines and explain how to take them or fill out the label. Of course, we have the reason we have so many translators with us is because everything needs to be done in Ukrainian. The people, only the youngest people speak English. Generally, the older population speaks Ukrainian or Russian. Well, Russian is not being spoken anymore in Ukraine.
I would imagine not.
Yeah.
I would imagine not.
If you can help it. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you did bring up, the Native American reservations and things like that. That was under the COVID Care Force. Tell us why you made the switch with name, and how has that gone for you?
Yeah. So when we started, when COVID just hit us like a tsunami, I remember with taking my sons and son-in-laws, we went to the Super Bowl. That was February, I think, 20th of 2020, something like that. And we'd heard about COVID, but, I think there was some people in Seattle, a nursing home that had it. And of course, we heard about China, but no one really thought it was going to hit the United States really bad. We thought surely, this great, smart, wealthy, rich country that's so advanced will handle this. And boom, that's almost like looking back at a time in the past, the good old days. But when COVID started hitting really hard, I left the Super Bowl and flew over to the Philippines where I was giving some lectures, and then went on to Brunei and Timor-Leste and Indonesia and Malaysia, where both Heart to Heart have had projects, and I've also worked with various projects over there. And while I was there in some of those countries, they were taking COVID very seriously. They were looking. There were no vaccines available, of course, but they wanted to know where you had come from and were you having any symptoms of anything and all of that. And when I flew back to the United States, I was there about 3 weeks. When I flew back to the United States, I wasn't asked at immigration or anything about where I'd been. And there were people standing in line that had come from Japan and China, which is where COVID was really heavy. And then they didn't take my temperature. I didn't fill out a health screening thing. I just thought, boy, I'm worried that COVID is going to just hit us. And well, sure enough, it did. And so we know that New York was the epicenter. In fact, it started in Queens in New York City, and New York City got really hit hard. And the hospitals were overwhelmed and full. So we sent teams there. But I knew even there, even in New York, I knew there would come a time when we would finally get COVID under control, quote, under control. It's now kind of more of a pandemic than an epidemic. And so as I formed COVID Care Force, I actually filed the paperwork to incorporate Global Care Force. And then I applied for the 501c3, from the IRS to make it nonprofit at the same time. And so we just left that alone until COVID started waning and hospitals were starting to be able to handle it better. And now we've shifted to Global Care Force. So that's the story.
So you had foresight. You knew what was coming down the road as an ER doctor. We're talking with Dr. Gary Morsch, who is founder of the Global Care Force and the original founder of Heart to Heart. You've been in this quote unquote business for a long time. What can you tell us about making that journey with a health associated nonprofits?
Right. Well, even in the wealthiest of countries and the best of healthcare systems, there's lots of pockets of need. We have them certainly in our country. I work in ERs, and I work in ERs that are in impoverished areas, and I work, and my group does. We have about 100 hospitals now that we staff through Docs Who Care. And we work actually in hospitals that serve the Indian populations, the Native Americans in our country, out in Nebraska, near Pine Ridge and other places. So we know there's needs. There always have been. And so, one question I ask myself, even living here in Johnson County, is, what can I do to help people in need? But, I've got this education, I've got this ability, I've got energy and health, and I've got a good job with a good income. So am I just going to coast and do that and play golf every Wednesday afternoon? Or am I going to try to help where the real needs are? So I decided from the very beginning of my medical career, I would get involved in helping people that didn't have good access to healthcare. So I was one of the ones early on that helped organize the Johnson County Health Partnership, which became the Health Partnership of Johnson County, which is very wonderful. I've helped the rescue missions there downtown, City Union, and the shelter now that's called the Kansas City Rescue Mission. And then I did international volunteer missions to around the world. I worked with the Red Cross with refugees in Cambodia and crossing into Thailand. And so, I was just trying to do my thing. And what I learned is a lot of my colleagues came to me and said, I'm interested in doing that, but I just don't know how to plug in. And could I go with you, or could you help to kind of point me in the right direction. And that's how Heart to Heart started. It was just really realizing there's a lot of interest of people that want to volunteer and want to help. And so that's what I've been doing the rest of for my life. I feel like my job, my goal is not necessarily to be the one that to deliver the care or the medicines, but to be the one perhaps behind the scenes that's organizing it, recruiting volunteers, speaking on behalf of the needs and of people in the projects, and trying to mobilize as many people as I can to serve. And so that's what Global Care Force is doing. Who knows where the next needs will be? We know right now we've got Ukraine and Native American populations that we're working with, and we've got soup kitchens and hospices and homeless shelters that our volunteers are serving in. And by the way, those don't need to be medical volunteers necessarily. In a hospice or in a nursing home, and these are always for very, populations that are left out, and so we feed patients and bathe them and take care of them. If someone's medically trained, they can administer medications, change wound dressings. Nurses, of course, CNAs, nurses, LPNs can start IVs and give IV treatment. So depending on what the volunteers' skills are, we'll put them to work. But you don't have to have any healthcare background. Now, Ukraine, they're all healthcare, but many other places we're serving, you don't have to be a healthcare professional.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm sure there are many folks who would hear this and go, gosh, I'm just not a doctor or have that medical background, but how can I help? And obviously we talked about donating funds, which is important. And now you say you can even have skin in the game, even though you don't have an MD, CNA, MNOP behind your name. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned. So you're in Ukraine and you have medicines and things that you need, and you're able to bring in that equipment and everything. How do you, quote unquote, protect your volunteers? I mean, you're going into a country that's, I'm sure they've had their COVID issues, and we probably don't know the extent just because of various things. So how do you protect those that you're able to take with you to help the population?
Right. That's a very good question. And I'm glad you ask it, because I get kind of cavalier sometimes. Risk is a continuum from, I don't want any risk, and therefore I'm not going to fly anywhere. I'm not going to hardly drive. I'm going to always wear my seatbelt. I'm going to, whatever, to people like me who, I can live with a lot of risk. And part of that is my personality, but part of it is also because anybody that volunteers to serve in the military has to, that they can take, they're accepting some risk that the normal person isn't going to take. And then if you serve in the military in combat zones, which not every soldier or sailor or airman does, but if you serve in a combat zone, and if you're an enlisted and an infantry soldier that's actually on the front lines, well, now the risk just goes up. Well, no, the average volunteer is really more, they're normal people who do not want to put themselves or expose themselves to unnecessary risk. And so as the images we watch on TV literally every day about the Ukraine war, what you see is the worst of the worst. What you're not seeing is the areas that are untouched, that weren't bombed, that life is almost normal. It's not exactly normal, but it goes on. And so if it was me, I'd be organizing volunteers to go to the medics to go to the front line and work with the Ukrainian army. And maybe we will. That's, I got to get one kind of get things going as we can. So what we're doing is we're making sure that the work we're doing, the teams, the locations they go to, the areas they go to, the routes they travel are very safe. And we're monitoring that, daily. We have staff there in Ukraine. We've hired people to work for Global Care Force there in Ukraine who are watching everything closely, and we will change our itinerary if we need to. When the air raid sirens go off, we take cover, we go into bunkers, designated areas. The last thing we want to do is have a volunteer injured or, of course, worst of all, killed. And in all my years of mobilizing volunteers through Heart to Heart and through many other organizations, including COVID Care Force and Global Care Force, never have we had any serious injuries, any deaths, anything that, no medical evacuations. Knock on wood and thank God, inshallah. I hope that that'll never happen. So we just work hard. We've also supplied lots of bulletproof vests and combat body armor. And if someone feels more comfortable wearing that, of course, I think we should stay out of places where you have to wear body armor or bulletproof vest. But I do go into places, and some of our team members where it is more, the risk is higher. So we just manage it the best we can, but no one should feel guilty because they just don't feel comfortable going. The nurse that's leading our teams, I asked her to go into Ukraine with me months ago, and she's lived in Ukraine. She's been a nurse. She's organized medical teams there over the years. She speaks Ukrainian, and she was just so worried about getting hurt or injured or something, that the best she would do, she felt comfortable with was working with the refugees on the border in Poland as they came across.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. That's good.
Those people need help as well. So, and I did want to put a shout out in our conversation that I guess Lawrence and Prairie Village police departments even have donated body armor to you. So anybody in or law enforcement out there, if you've got some spare equipment, make sure you check out Global Care Force. We've just got a minute or so left. Tell me, where do you hope to be in 5 years with all these efforts?
I've been asked that through various organizations, including Heart to Heart. And I always say, and I say to my staff, the goal is not to be big or well known. The goal is to be a good steward of the resources of the people, the volunteers, do the best we can. As you know, I worked with Mother Teresa in the last 10 or 15 years of her life and knew her well. And one of the things I would ask her is about, how did you plan to have a big order, missionaries of charity? And she goes, no. She goes, I just take care of one person at a time. And she goes, we're not called to success. We're called to be faithful. We're called to faithfulness. And so I want to be faithful with the resources God has given our country, our world, my training, and I want to mobilize those, and we'll do our best. And maybe Global Care Force will be the huge organization that Heart to Heart has become, or maybe it won't be sustainable. Who knows? Because for whatever reasons. But I know our measures of success is that we do the best we can with what we have.
And you're doing that, and you're helping individuals. There's a saying from Anne Frank that no one need wait a single moment to start to improve the world. And that's what you're doing, Dr. Morsch. And we thank you. Best of luck. And we'll look forward to the next time you can join us.
Ruth, keep beating the drum.
Thank you for joining us for Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, produced by Charitable Communications. This Casey Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. To be a guest on Casey Cares or underwriting opportunities, you can visit our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread love. You find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And catch us Saturday mornings on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM, 8 AM. Thank you for joining us on Casey Cares.